Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, we are back talking some Monarch Legacy of Monsters. It's been a little while, I know. I said that I was going to do each episode every week, but yeah, that was poor planning on my part. So I do apologize because once we got into Splatter, or not Splatterthon, but December to Dismember, everything got a little hectic. And I figured at this point, I was already so many episodes behind, so why not just sit down with our boy Luke here and we can just finish this whole thing out together? And basically get to where I wanted to go. Because I think the problem that I did was I went too in depth. I started going each piece episode by episode instead of just doing what I said I was going to do from the start. We're just talking about the actual bits of spoilers that I really found interesting. So, Luke, where we left off with you, you had seen the first 8 episodes. Were there any real spoilery bits in those 8 episodes that you just wanted to quickly touch on before we dive into the final 2 episodes here and really catch up?
Unfortunately, I have not went back and revisited those first 8 episodes, so I only have vague memories of them, so I wouldn't be can't really pull out any deep dive bits or anything like that. So overall, no, I know that I was really happy with the way episode 8 ended on that kind
Hmm.
of cliffhanger as to what we were going to see. So it really did leave you wanting more.
Yeah, and so going back to kind of our initial review, you were very positive on the show. We both I think you walked away with a must see, and I think I did too. But this was very something we were very excited about. I know as I've been going through the episodes, I've kind of gotten to see a little bit with this being my second viewing on all of these episodes, except for the last two. I've only seen them once because I decided again I'm going to go back and rewatch from episode 5 on, just so I could have a real fresh look at everything. And I gotta say that this show to me is a way better binge than it is episodically. I gotta come out right out front and say that I think that binging this series, things are way more satisfying. The conclusions pay off a lot faster. I think that there were a few episodes here, week to week, that I could easily see people getting kind of left in the dust a little bit and being like, "Man, this was kind of a boring episode." Especially if you're just here for the monsters. Now, I never really found anything that boring, but I did hear a lot of complaints from that in our comment section and just in forums and stuff online in general. Um, I know you haven't gone back and watched it, so you really haven't experienced that episodic nature of it. But do you, just from watching it all in one sitting, did you find any parts to be kind of slow, especially in the back half here?
I think looking at it, I think Godzilla as a property is probably you're always going to have two sides of the coin there in this
Yeah.
argument of I want monsters or I want more character development, and you're never going to be able to please both audiences. For me here, I think honestly, after reflecting on it, and it was an actual thought in my head of saying I really wish I would have been able to experience this episode by episode rather than being able having to binge watch this thing as a whole. Um, because I would have liked to have actually sat with these characters and kind of reflected on those little bits of story that they do give us. And then everything that I did see with the monsters, from I guess from me, I wasn't necessarily going into 8 episodes thinking we were going to get monsters fighting for those 8 episodes. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of an unrealistic take. I think they should be treated as almost a main event player, a special attraction, if you will. Where
Oh yeah.
yes, we have our character development, and then also we're going to treat you to a monster. And I think from reflecting on it and from what I remember, I was really happy with the way that they kind of had. We build our characters and then we kind of spruce in the monsters. And each episode, for the most part, I believe we got some sort of different monsters, something new to it. So for me, I thought it was pretty well balanced.
Yeah, and I agree with you mostly for, I want to say, like the first 7 episodes or so. They did a good job of that. I think there was, maybe it was around episode 7 or 8. They all kind of run together after a minute, especially after binge watching them through again. because it does just flow like one long story. Which, these are just really surface level complaints to me. I think once you get to those last couple episodes, they really focus heavy on the characters until the final like 2 episodes. Because once you get into 9 and 10 here, that's when we really start to see more monsters again. Because especially once you get into things like episode 5, where we really get to go back and see more of Kate's backstory, and we actually dive into her character. We meet her mom, which I like all of that. I gotta say, I know some people. Again, you're right. There's two different camps. Some people are really enjoying the kind of family turmoil that we've been dealt with this series, and others, not so much. I thought that storyline was very consistent throughout this entire series. I think right up until the final episode, it was very satisfying. Um, all but one moment, which I'll save probably towards the last half of our talk here because it's a big spoiler. But it's one of those things where I thought like episode 5 was really strong with just having them introduce Kate's mom, and then getting to see kind of her relationship dynamic and everything, and just kind of where she left everything, and how she kind of takes a little bit after her dad being kind of a cheater and everything. So you kind of get these layers just unraveled as the series goes on. And then obviously we had the big reveal with May about an episode or so later, where she works for Apex, which I don't know if you remember Apex from Kong versus Godzilla. They were kind of that was their real big introduction. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, Apex being involved. I had a feeling they'd have to show up at some point, but we had stuck so far into 2015 that it was just kind of one of those things where I'm like, maybe we won't actually get that far. I don't actually know when Apex was established. So, but having May kind of be that character that's kind of almost living two different lives was really cool. And I gotta say, like, as a whole, I think the series really hinges itself on just duality and just kind of living alternate lives, and being truthful with yourself as the messaging. It's like I think they handled that really well.
And I think they had some interesting takes on these characters. They weren't necessarily, so formulaic as to what we do see all the time. And, I know you're talking about the kind of the pacing of the entire season as a whole. I think it really does follow kind of what we do see with a lot of these series where, you know, we're character building, and then by episode 7 we're kind of getting into, it's a battle with Vecna. It's all that, with Stranger Things. It's we're building, we're building, and now okay, we're pulling the trigger, and here we go with Lee, forming his plan of, what he's going to do with the Titans and things like that. So I mean, for me, I don't think, from my perspective, it necessarily ran together. It did follow that path that we do usually see, where by the time we get into those later episodes, okay, now our main goal is in focus. We're kind of nearing toward the finish line, so we really got to put an emphasis on it. And that's where, episode 8, when we do leave off, it did leave me in a cliffhanger to say, okay, I really can't wait to see what these next 2 episodes are going to look like.
And you can say what the cliffhanger is, because I know that was a huge thing in your spoiler reveal. So why don't we talk about that before we dive into 9 and 10? So leaving off with episode 8, just let the cork off, man. How did that feel when you left with that cliffhanger?
You mean when they all go, when they dive into
Yeah.
the what do they call it? I don't know.
So like there's a few things. They're calling them rifts essentially in this. So it's like a rift, more or less a place between the Hollow Earth and our planet, pretty much.
Did they mention what they Kiko calls it something, I think. I can't remember what it was in one of these episodes, I think.
There's
Um
so much technical
yeah.
jargon thrown
Um
around throughout
I can
these
remember she had a name for it. I didn't know if you remembered it. But anyway, that kind of leaving us off on that and saying, okay, these next 2 episodes are gonna feel different because we're gonna dive into something that you haven't seen from these previous 8 episodes. I really enjoyed that because, after you binge watch 8 episodes, you're like, well, what more can they really do here? But they kind of leave you wanting to see what that's going to look like. So once we finally get, I love the opening to episode 9. I thought that kind of cold open before we even really get into what the rest of the episode's going to look like and what that fallout's going to be. It was really intriguing to me because it got me excited for what was going to be, and I think it's like 10 minutes before, we actually get into with the opening credits and everything into the actual bulk of the episode. But yeah, leaving off on that eighth episode, it was really exciting because for me, I've perused the kind of Godzilla universe, but I'm not deep ingrained into it. So I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like. So I think, leaving the fans wanting to see it, and I this thing didn't have a like break, right, for the holidays or anything like that.
No,
It's been
this has been
consistently week to week.
consistent. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, because like for me, we got those first 8 for a bit early, and then we didn't get those last 2 for a little bit later. So it left me dangling, really wanting to see what that fallout was going to look like.
Yeah, and I think that it's so smart because it is something that I didn't even catch it my first time going around how much people were really harping on the fact until he was in that I think the Monarch interrogation room in episode 5 when she had mentioned how Lee would be so much older than he's supposed to be, and then to have him come back, get pushed through the rift like he did, and that's why he looks a bit younger, I guess, than he's supposed to. I thought that was a really nice touch, and again, it really does kind of lean into this show being way more complex and a little bit more, in tune with the science fiction angle than I was anticipating for the Monarch Legacy of Monsters show. Like I think everybody kind of had this specific vision in mind for what this show would look like, and they really turned it on its head by saying, no, we're going to stray a little bit more science fiction. We're going to play with a little bit more of the world between worlds, not to steal stuff from Star Wars, but between Hollow Earth and here. And we're going to kind of, what I'm going to get to at the very end here, really reshape what I think they're heading towards with Legendary and this whole monster verse in and of itself.
Yeah, and looking at it, when we had dealt with Lee, and they made little comments in terms of well, you look really good for someone who's in their 90s, and that I remember specifically almost noting in my head as we were watching it, because I was like, oh, okay, so they're not showing all their cards here, they have some more story to tell, and I didn't really know how they were going to remedy that, or what kind of lore they were going to add to it. So as soon as we got into episode 9 and we kind of start figuring out everything, and that kind of when Lee realizes that it is no longer 1962, it's actually 1982, and what a great kind of um moment that is, as he's starting to figure out, and then he kind of just passes out, and then once that was dropped, I started thinking of, how what with how episode 9 ends, and I was like, is that what we're gonna go with here? Because I had me curious.
Yeah, and with episode 9 too. I mean, we have a really cool kaiju in there. I don't want to skip over that because we're talking so much of the story and character stuff. But the boars were really awesome. I
Were they
thought that was
new
a great
to
design. Yeah,
you?
also
Okay.
new. Yeah,
I
everything in here except for Godzilla, I want to say was a new Titan. I haven't
okay.
seen any. Okay, there's one returning Titan, very last scene. But I won't. Obviously, we'll save that for a minute, but that's just more a nod to the fans. But it's I thought that was a really cool design. I've really liked a lot of the monsters in this. I mean, I know that's the whole Legacy of Monsters title, but like I think that they really introduced a lot of really cool unique ideas, especially with things like the Frost Vark. I think still, to me, and I could say pretty safely for you, I think it takes the cake as being one of the most intriguing Titans we've gotten just visually, out of any of the legendary stuff that they've done. It's right up there with some of my favorites that we've gotten in recent memory as far as new additions to Godzilla lore and universe.
Yeah, and I'll say, I second that, but I'll be honest, I did actually pause it and rewind because I wanted to check out those boars. I thought that the
Hmm.
design looked fantastic. It was
Oh
really
yeah.
intriguing. This is something where, as they're opening up all this lore with these titans, that I would love to see more of this. I don't know how you intertwine that necessarily, other than continue the show, because I think the movies seem to be pretty much eaten up right now, with at least right now with the direction they're going in. But I would love to see, a lot of these Titans get a little more screen time at some point, kind of deep dive into their lore and see what they're capable of.
Yeah, no, and I think that, I mean, obviously, I think we leave it off for, um, clearly another season. I guess we can kind of tie into things a little bit there, but we definitely leave it off for another season. But I think that we have to wait to see, obviously, what Kong and Godzilla: The New Empire is going to bring. Because I think that's going to really shake things up. But I cannot discount that the added element of riffs and really diving into the Hollow Earth stuff here and really kind of making us a bit more aware that the Hollow Earth, it's not so cut and dry. It's not just I'm going to fall through a hole in the middle of the world and get flipped turned upside down and then I'm there. It is, you can get lost in between it, and it opens up this whole idea of like almost multiverses, with us bringing people who are who go down there. They kind of have that concept in Interstellar a little bit, where it's like you lose time, and we don't see that in the Hollow Earth. So when that first got introduced, I was a little bit like, so why didn't they lose time in Kong versus Godzilla? But because they had those ships, they were able to just glide straight through without getting lost in between the cracks. So I thought that that was a really cool concept, and it does open the door for a lot of big fan theories and things like that. Especially one of them being, and I'll just rip the Band-Aid off now because I'd rather just get this part done with, and then we'll talk about the actual end of this series. But the concept here that I've seen getting floated around is that with these kind of opening now, what are being called riffs, and I know that you also were a fan of Pacific Rim. We also know that they're under the same umbrella as the MonsterVerse here, and and Pacific Rim very specifically mentioning their kind of where these monsters come from, a specific point in their universe. They don't know where it is, but it's a rift in almost like this hole in the world that opens up and they get to come through. And as well as if you look back at this, and I had to go back and do a bunch of research from this too to kind of make sure I was correct here. They say in the first Pacific Rim that their monsters started to emerge in 2013. Godzilla emerges in 2014. So, you're kind of getting this consistent timeline here where it's like they're not too far off from each other. And from everything that we have learned, it's kind of like, well, it would make sense that if they wanted to intertwine these universes finally at the end here and really give us that, Jaegers versus classic kaiju versus some of the kaiju from there, they could do it. This is how you would do it, is by using these riffs between the Hollow Earth and kind of showing that, yeah, we can have kind of a, I don't want to call it multiverse because I know that's leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth with all the things the superhero stuff has tried to do, but in a sense that's what you're doing. It's kind of creating a rift in time.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. I think I'd be more excited if Pacific Rim 2 hadn't happened. So I would like for them to kind of maybe give us a Pacific Rim 3 before we even start to trying to, I guess, intertwine the universe here. Just because I think, especially Pacific Rim's probably in a lot of people's rear view for the most part.
Hmm.
Just because I think the second one was so forgettable, and then it's been a minute since the original came out. So I would love to see a third installment there. Maybe bring the original cast back from the first one and kind of restore that prominence. Because honestly, after that first Pacific Rim, I was all on board because that was a big talking point after
The
Godzilla
best
come
part
out.
about it too is like, looking back on it, you could easily retcon Pacific Rim 2. Like, I still think that movie's fun. It's fun, but it's not anywhere near as good as the first film.
Yeah.
And it just really feels like a slight detour. So it's like you could retcon that entire thing and really tie it in here to make it work and be consistent with that first one. And could you imagine getting Charlie Hunnam back and everything? And just the other fact is too, there's a guy on YouTube named Heavy Spoilers. I'm sure some of you guys will have heard this too. He brings up the fact that in Kong versus Godzilla, they use the technology of linking your neurally linking yourself to Mechagodzilla to fight. So it's like, the parallels are there. This just adds to that theory, but that's broad spectrum here. What I found interesting really was again, if I want to tie things back to kind of this emotional ending that we had, again, the season finale, I think a lot of people might be expecting more monster fights. We do get a pretty good one, but I really found myself loving the sequence in which Shaw and Kay get to meet again. I thought that was one of the best moments of this entire series for me. Just Kurt Russell sold that so well. And like it really, you could feel him getting choked up and everything. And I mean, he's just been a gem this entire season.
Oh yeah, I mean, we talked about it even prior to seeing any of this. That having Wyatt Russell and Kurt Russell in the series instantly gave this, some prominence to it regardless. And Kurt Russell, Wyatt Russell didn't disappoint, but Kurt Russell, I mean, anytime he's on screen, man, the guy steals the show. And that was such an emotional moment. As soon as we understood that dynamic of what had happened to Lee when he had lost those 20 years, and then by the time we get to the end of episode 9 and we know Kiko's there, and in my head I was like, after she had shown up on screen, I just could not wait for them to reunite, and the way that he played it off, I think, felt so organic, felt so real, because he's way older and she hasn't aged a day, and it was like one of those, if I felt the tension, I was nervous for him to be able to present himself way older than what she would have thought, because especially what they do establish earlier on in the show, where you can tell that Lee had some feelings for her at one point, and probably still does. And
Oh, absolutely.
that nervousness of him now being technically an old man and her still being what he remembered in his head for decades upon decades. It was just, you could tell that he was like this almost nervous schoolboy, waiting to see his crush again.
Yeah, and so like one piece I wanted to touch on that I don't know, was this, it's kind of all getting meshed again in my brain with so much to try to remember here, but was it was only hinted that her son was Lee's, right? So Hiroshi.
Yeah, it was only hinted. I didn't know if were they saying that, or was it just a hint? Like, was it
I
there to mess with us, or was it like,
I think it would make sense because I mean because it makes me think back to, I think it was episode 3 or 4 where he even says, your father was more like a son to me than you'll ever know, and stuff like that when he's talking to Kate and them and stuff like that. It's like it's just, I feel like they never fully give you that answer, which I kind of like, but also it's one of those things where it's like it's so implied because it's like, they share that kiss, they clearly have this kind of chemistry together, but then we do this time jump where we see them and it's, implied that, she had a kid with another guy. We never know who that other guy is, but Bill obviously took him under his wing and everything, and it is what it is. So it's just so, I was waiting for that needle to drop, but I don't think it is. And if it never does, it'll probably be in another season of this, considering that Kay is back. And, she's clearly, if they do another season, she's going to be a prominent character. She's not just going to, fall off of into a hole for an episode and only be seen in flashbacks. So
am I remembering incorrectly? Didn't Lee come to her house and she already had the son?
you see, that's where things get a little lost for me, where it's like, I don't know. I don't
And
know if
was
she
it,
had the son already.
wait, wasn't didn't she say she was nervous to let everyone know about this part of her life?
I think so. See, like everything's getting kind of lost in there now, so we'll have to go back and see. Clear that up
Yeah.
for us in the comments, because like I think maybe I might be creating little fantasies in my brain when it comes to
Okay.
that, just
Because
because again the
n-
chemistry was solid.
now that I'm thinking about it, because I thought Lee had went to her house, and then
Yeah,
she said that, as she was trying to rush him out, or what are you doing here? And then the boy showed up.
that's okay. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Is that episode
I can't remember.
6? I
I
think it's
can't.
episode 6. Okay, so because that's when they went to the ball, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I think you're right. So he was already around then.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll take that off the table. But would have been cool. Anyway, yeah, no. And I think like, we're a little bouncing all over the place, but we're getting the gist here. Um I'll just rip the band-aid off on this too. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little disappointed with how they left off Shaw's character. I think that's fine for having him kind of get, sucked off into the letting himself go, sacrificing himself, whatever you want to call it. But it just feels so like we're just swapping, K for Lee and Lee for K. It might be satisfying to some. I just felt like it was mighty convenient.
Yeah, I mean, you could see it coming from a mile away, I
Hmm.
think. When we go into what could season 2 look like if there's going to be season 2, obviously you can't really do the dynamic they hit in the initial where you're doing all these flashbacks with 1962 and kind of piecing together a timeline. We've already seen it now. We kind of know everyone's dynamic. So I think, kind of I'm intrigued to see Kurt Russell, Lee Shaw on his own against a bunch of kaijus.
I hope
Yeah, I don't think by any means he's dead.
because because again, they didn't show it.
Yeah,
I rewound that when I watched it the other night, and I rewatched some of it today. That last like few minutes there, just to make sure I had everything. Literally before we got on, and yeah, they never show him again. He just gets kind of sucked off into it. And obviously the golden rule, which worked out obviously in Kay's case, because if you don't see a body, they're not dead. Um, yeah, I don't know. I would love to see that. I'd love
yeah.
to see Lee, especially could you imagine like the big cliffhanger or like one of the big things in Kong versus Godzilla is they go to the Hollow Earth and maybe they do wind up in this world between worlds for a bit and fucking Kurt Russell's Lee Shaw's is just there,
He's got like an
buddying
eye
around with
patch and
Kong.
snakeskin pants.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. That's how they get the Snake Plissken remake there for you. That'd be great. But yeah, I was a little disappointed if that's how he's out for real.
Yeah.
If they don't, it's better. But if that's how you kill that character, I'm gonna be pretty upset because like I thought that consistently throughout the series, he was my favorite part.
And for me, and again, who knows how this is all going to play out. If we don't get a season 2, for me, I'm not banking on a season 2. What more so I'm thinking about, and hey, we could not see Lee Shaw in Monarch if there is a season 2, but I do think he's going to show up. Like you're saying, if he shows up in the more so the cinematic portion of everything, because
Hmm.
I think they established this character for a reason, and the way he's been left off for a reason. I think he's
I
going to
hope
pop
so.
up, and like if he pops up, like in the new Godzilla film, and I mean, like, I think, something could be interesting of, I think it'll be a big, oh my gosh moment for us in the theater. If, especially if season 2 of Monarch passes and we don't see him anymore, and then we're getting a new Godzilla movie and Kurt Russell just shows up. I mean, you already have a character we're resonating with. So I don't think that's the last we've seen of Lee Shaw, and whether it's going to be in actual Monarch or just actually in the cinematic universe.
Yeah, because I mean, he's if you think about it, he's in 9 episodes of a 10 episode series, so it's like he's a major player now, and that's the thing about all this. I think that my stepping away, kind of wrapping up my final thoughts here. I think that this is still one of my favorite pieces of the MonsterVerse that we've gotten. I thought that this was really a great mature take to the material, and it's a really nice way to explore this universe and leave those big cinematic outings more so for our key players like Kong and Godzilla dominating the cinematic universe. And we get to kind of have our more human characters on this because I think like spending more time with them, having all this, it works so much better. And yeah, I mean, through and through, I was really impressed with the show. I think that there's definitely an understanding of people who might not like it as much having to watch it week to week. I know you said that you would like to see it week to week. I can tell you being on the other side there, that it was one of those things where I think it's a better story, binging it, getting, the I guess the down episodes, the episodes that aren't as exciting, uh, you know, they go by a lot faster. They feel more in tune and more like they fit in place to me, as opposed to watching it and then me having to sit here and talk about it, knowing things and having people, respond and be like, well, what about this? I'm a little bit let down by this. And it's like, well, in an episode or two, you're going to be fine. It's just kind of like, maybe I'm just being a little too generous to the people who want answers right away, but that's just really where I sit with it. I still think this is a bang up show, and I'm really excited to hopefully see more of it in the future, especially our characters.
Yeah, and I think people have to understand this is long form storytelling where it's like you're not going to get everything wrapped up in an hour and a half and be on your way. This is, it's episodic for a reason where we are taking our time. We are deep diving into these characters to give them more teeth than what we have been seeing. And I think this is a great kind of dynamic here, as we just mentioned with Lee. He could potentially pop up elsewhere. And this is kind of having your cake and eating it too, in a sense, where you could
Hmm.
build these characters in Monarch and then have them show up in the movies without having to build the character dynamics, because we already know if Lee Shaw already shows up in anything, hey, we don't need an introduction to him, really. We already know what he's about and why he's there. And I think you could do that with a lot of this stuff, really start building these characters in the television shows and then translating them onto film if need be. So I'm intrigued to see where this is going to go. I think these final two episodes for me really did the trick. I think, overall, it was I gave it a must see with those 8 episodes. I didn't know how this was going to turn out, but I got to say with the conclusion here, all 10 episodes, for me, you're going to get a must see.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm going to give it that as well. I definitely, as a fan, there's some things I really like. There's some things I want to see more. I'm always battling with that side of me that's like, oh, I feel like I didn't get enough kaiju here. But I also have to take a step back and realize that, I think I saw a comment a few episodes back. Someone said it's called Monarch Legacy of Monsters, not Godzilla Legacy of Monsters. And I think that's something that we all have to remember a little bit. And the fact, again, that we got Godzilla in such a prime state, in such a wonderful presentation like this on the small screen for 10 episodes, that's pretty damn impressive. And not only that, but the very last thing we get to leave off on is our boy Kong shows up, makes a quick little cameo appearance. I thought that was cool, clearly setting up that we're leading right into the events of Kong and Godzilla. So maybe I think they said it was 2 years. So if it was 15, so we're right about there. Yeah, I think we're about 2018, 2019. So we're getting close to the events of that film, and yeah, I thought that was really cool. So I'm hoping that in Kong and Godzilla: The New Empire, we will see some of our characters from this show up, even if it's not Lee Shaw. I'm hoping for Kay. I'm hoping for Kate. At least some of these guys. Hey, hell, even give me Tim. I'll take Tim. I ended up liking Tim after a while. He really grew on me by the end there. So, and May, she's got a lot going on. She's got some connections with Apex and stuff. So, really curious to see what's going on there. So, yeah, it's a good show. I got to give it that. It's a solid show, and it's over. And now we don't know if we're getting any more. So we'll have to see. All will be hopefully revealed after Kong and Godzilla, which we only have a few months left
Yeah.
till that. Was that March or May? I know it's
I
one of
thought
the
it
end
was
months.
March, but I don't know.
March, maybe.
I
That'd be
don't know.
cool. That'd be
I could be
cool.
wrong.
It's probably May. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap us up here for Monarch Legacy of Monsters. That's all the episodes, final series spoilers there for you. Obviously, there's probably going to be a lot more conversation to be had in the comments, so feel free, let us know what we missed. If you want to hear our thoughts on it, I'll try to comment back and respond. And yeah, just let us know how you guys feel about the future of the Monsterverse. Are you excited for it, or after Godzilla -1, or are you just like, no, I only want Toho Godzilla now? So we shall see. But yeah, guys, other than that, we got a lot of great content on the channel. So keep it right here. And yeah, I guess until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.